Things improved when he stopped at the station. As he was no longer going at speed, there was no longer a continuous stream of seeds in the air, only an occasional few that floated across the station platform. The diesel was pleased with this, but not for very long. I'm feeling hot," he whined to his driver. "It's a hot day," replied his driver shortly. "Just put up with it for a while." The diesel growled crossly, but he decided not to dwell on the problem. It might have been better if he had. The rail tour ran all day, stopping occasionally at stations and other sites along the line. The diesel was feeling pleased with himself. He had made good time, had a long rest at the last station, and it was nearly time to go home. Even the dreaded dandelion seeds had let up as the wind went down. The tour was also to pass through Oakham Road, where he had taken the visitors that morning. The diesel chuckled. "I'll rush through the station and blow my horn to make them jump," he said to himself. "That'll show those out-of-date kettles." He rolled through the workstation and onto the first stretch of the Oakham Road line. But as Acorn Junction came into sight, he began to feel poorly again. "Something's wrong with me," he complained to his driver. "I feel overheated and I can't breathe properly." This time, there was indeed something wrong. The diesel slowed right down as he reached the platform. Then he coughed, spluttered, and stopped in a noxious cloud of diesel smoke. Stepney and Leo were shunting Jordan, who had just come out of the works, onto the coaling line nearby, and they came to see what the matter was. They looked at the diesel and laughed. "Now who's the failed, obsolete engine?" chuckled Leo. "A waste of money, are we?" giggled Stepney. "It sounds like they'll have to spend a small fortune putting you right." The diesel's reply was drowned by a cloud of thick black smoke, which continued to spew from his generator. An inspector came to examine him, while anxious passengers waited for news. When the inspector checked the diesel's air intake, he was most surprised. "There you have it," he said in a half laugh. "You've sucked up a field's worth of dandelion seeds, you great pillock. They've clogged your filter and are stopping you from drawing in the air you need to burn fuel." The diesel gulped and went into a deep shade of red, as well as a sickly green. Presently, a small boy came out of the cafe with his family and two sisters. All three of them had bottles of fizzy pop. "Look here," said the little boy. "This drink's called Dandelion and Burdock. I think it's super, don't you think?" The diesel shuddered, and Leo sniggered. "And so history repeats itself," he said quietly to his friend. Stepney chuckled and didn't say another word. It'll take too long to clean it out," continued the inspector, "and we haven't got a spare engine to pull the train, or a place to put old Burdock here. The yard's full of trucks." "Can we help, sir?" piped up Stepney. Leo stared, and then looked a little worried. The inspector looked doubtfully at the two engines. "Are you sure?" he asked. "This is a heavy train, and you'll have to pull old Burdock as well as far as the other railway." Stepney smiled. "I've pulled 20 coach trains through London for years," he said, "and did a similar job on the last time I was here. And Leo's a strong shunter," he added. "I'm sure we can pull it together." The inspector frowned and then sighed. "What choice do we have?" he said at last. The new controller agreed to the plan and made the arrangements while Stepney shunted onto the train with a very worried-looking Leo behind him. "I don't know if I can do this," said Leo. "My brothers failed as passenger engines, remember?" Stepney smiled. Thomas seems to get along just fine, he said reassuringly. And we need your strength on a job like this. We'll show Burdock and the passengers a bit of Brighton might, won't we? Leo smiled and felt a little braver. At last, it was time to leave. The guard blew his whistle, the engines dug their wheels into the sand they'd spread on the rails, and gave a great heave. Slowly but surely, the train began to move. The two engines snorted in front, the diesel watching in dazed silence, and the passengers cheering the two engines on out of the windows before the guard told them not to. They were soon gaining speed as they passed through Hazelwood Holt, rocketed over the bridge which crossed the estuary and into Ballyhoo. Leo cantered along, and Stepney barked excitedly in front. The train grumbled onto the main line, shot through Henry's tunnel, smoke and steam pouring from their funnels and their side rods almost non-existent metallic blurs. There were no hills to climb, and the rest of the journey was plain sailing. Through Vicarstown, over the bridge which connected Solihull to the mainland, and at last the two engines made their triumphant entry into Barrow, where another train was waiting to take the passengers home. They were tired but cheerful, out of puff but proud, and the passengers cheered and thanked the engines and their crews for getting them home safely. "We will be sure to come and visit both your railways," they said, "and bring our friends and relations. You two are definitely two of the most dedicated engines we've ever seen." "Which is less can be said about Burdock," Leo chuckled, as a pair of diesel shunters took the coaches and the very sorry-looking Burdock away. "He looks as sick as boiler sludge, but even worse. Wait till I tell Thomas about this." "Well, looks like we can be useful after all," Stepney smiled, as they made their way to the sheds for a rest. "For making fizzy pop, and for getting rid of nasty old diesels too."